Congrats
Oh, thank you.
on the book.
Thank you.
Yeah, very well done. Um, the book is for those people who are listening and not watching this on YouTube. The book is "Nothing Good Happens in Wazirabad on Wednesday." Um, it's your debut novel.
It is.
Um, my I've got a bunch of questions. Obviously, that's why we're here today.
Hmm.
But it's the book is not linear.
It is
Uh,
not.
yeah, it's not, day one, day two. It doesn't follow, sort of maybe a traditional arc of here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's the end, in that sort of way. Different chapters are almost like different stories into itself. And there's different characters that play a starring role, so to speak,
Hmm.
in each of them. Um, was that something conscious that you wanted to how you wanted to write this book, or is this how you see books and writing and literature?
No, this book didn't start off as a novel.
Yeah.
I started writing it, the first chapter that now it's called, it was Wednesday. The first chapter I wrote in 2016 when I was still in college in upstate New York. And it was a short story, my first short story that got published under the title "The Boy and the Dog," and it's still online somewhere. And then I kept writing stories, and
Oh,
after
really?
a while, I realized that all of these stories were happening in the same neighborhood, in the same town,
Okay.
and different characters started showing up in different stories. So it was, if anything, it was meant to be a collection of interconnected short stories.
Okay.
And then after a while, I was working on this book with through the Writers Trust Mentorship Program with Michael Christie, and we worked on making the connection stronger. And then
Okay.
once I got my editor at Scribner, and then that was when, like, she said, this is a novel. It's told in stories, but it's a novel.
Yeah.
It has all the ingredients to be a novel. So then during the last phase of the editing. So we try to move some chapters around to kind of, make it smoother.
Yeah.
But I think the book tells the story of a community in
Yeah.
Afghanistan in the 90s, and people who know Afghanistan was going through, a civil war in the 90s, and then it was very, very uncertain time. So if you take your life as a narrative, our narrative in Afghanistan in the 90s was interrupted, right?
Mm.
So if anything, this book's probably reflects that kind of interruption in the narrative, but still people are trying to, by exercising their memory, remembering things, and trying to make this narrative whole for themselves to get them through these very, very harsh days of the war.
Yeah. You're obviously from Afghanistan.
Yes.
Um, are these stories almost autobiographical for you? Like, are these? I also want to ask, like, are why you wrote a bunch of stories that sort of came together because you were writing about a place and a time and a place, and I'm wondering if that was your sort of writing based upon your life or the lives of people that you knew and the community that you knew.
That's true to some extent. In most novels you have a central character, but
Yeah.
in this book, if you even remove those two, three characters that play a more major role, then the Charkalai Wazirabad or Wazirabad, the place, that is the main character because all of the stories take place there. And from the first chapter, from the first page until the last page, when you read it, you might not come to a great understanding or an in-depth understanding of the characters, but you come away with knowing Wazirabad and
Yeah.
the kind of place it is, the geography, the kind of people that are living in Wazirabad. Um, but to answer your question, uh, every work of fiction, it has roots in
Of course.
reality.
Yeah.
For me, there were scenes that I experienced firsthand growing up in Afghanistan in the 90s. And then there were other things that I heard other people experienced or heard what other people had heard.
Yeah.
So, but of course, it's a fictionalized account of those days and um, of the place.
Yeah. How did you come up with the title?
The title, usually what I try to do before this, I used to when I was writing short stories, I would not come up with a title. I would
Okay.
just keep writing, and then if during the process of writing, I something came up, I would jot it down, but I wouldn't worry. And then usually a line or a phrase in the story would come up when I say, that can make a good title. And the same thing happened with this book. That exact same sentence is in one of the stories, in one of the chapters, halfway through the book. And it was long. My editor and I went back and forth on how to fit it on the cover of the book. But I think it was a good fitting title.
Yeah, it works, I think.
Yeah,
I think it
I
works.
hope so.
When your editor speaks with you and they're looking at all of these short stories that you've written and they tell you, this is a novel, this is actually a book, we can put all this together. What are your thoughts? Are you nah, they all have their own lives. It doesn't belong together. I'm curious, your thoughts when you were told that. Or did you always want to make it a book?
No, I was writing it to be a book, to
Okay.
be a book of, as I mentioned earlier, a book of interconnected stories.
Yeah. Okay.
And, novel, in a classic term, there are so many different ways that you could approach it. People write novels in letters. It's just
Ah.
a bunch of letters that you read, and in whole it makes a novel, right? Then you have the classic novels, but then also you have other other books. I can't remember which book by Faulkner, and it is four distinct stories. And somebody said, another writer said about that novel, that this would not be a novel if Faulkner hadn't written it, right? And in those
Ah.
four
Interesting.
stories, the only thing that is uh, what the four stories have in common in that book is flood, and it's just mentioned in the stories, right? So there, there are different ways of looking at it, and I think mine is not in any way unusual.
Yeah.
If you take what Faulkner did and what people write novels in letters and write novels in stories, it's not unusual.
No, that's
But
right.
if you compare it to the classic form of
Of course.
novels, it is kind of
Yeah.
lying outside it.
Absolutely. How if you don't mind me asking, how old were you when you left Afghanistan?
I left Afghanistan in 2013
Okay.
to go to the US to do my undergrad.
And have you? So you were quite old. I'm not saying you were old, but you were of that age that you still have these memories of Afghanistan. Have you been back at all?
The last time I went back, I think three times between 2013 and 2015. The last time I was there was December 2015,
Yeah.
but I haven't been back since.
Had it is the Afghanistan you remember today, or you remember since your last visit, is it the same as the Afghanistan that your readers discover in this book?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, in the sense that the place, the geography doesn't change. There will
Mm,
probably be small changes. There will be a few more houses built on the edge of town. Probably the farmlands are gone. But the town of Wazirabad, it still exists, and I'm sure it will exist for many more years to come,
yeah.
right? But in the other sense, it has changed, that the realities on the ground are
Mm,
different than what it used to be in the 90s.
yeah.
Um, so, and I can't really exactly put it into words how it is different, because you have to have an understanding of it in the 90s and have seen it through the years, how it changed and where it is now.
Yeah.
So it would be very hard to put it into a few words or sentences,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. For sure. Um, I'm wondering whether um, if you were to write a follow up to this book, what would the characters um be doing? Would they still be in that? Will they still be experiencing things? Will they still be worried about, burglaries and, would the families, you know, there's one family name escapes me right now where the daughter goes off and marries someone else, and the sister and the brother are upset at her. Would these sorts of would these characters and stories still be happening today, or would there be different things that they'd be worrying about, and different um different concerns and different experiences?
I think the family issues or personal issues that or interpersonal issues that we have, I think they outlast
Mm,
almost every other social or political issues,
yeah.
right? Because we, in a way, want to deal with what is um, being imposed on us politically or socially. You could, the way you dress or you can dress, um, but our personal stories are the ones that we hold on to because we think we have ownership over them, right?
Yeah.
And I know families that they've been estranged from each other over not even this one here at the Mules family. This is a big issue because all of a sudden a woman who traditionally are supposed to um, you know uh, obey what the father or the brother says, and all of a sudden she says, I don't accept this authority anymore because you have gambled with my life. I want to take control myself. And she makes a decision, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this kind of divides will last for very,
Forever.
very long time.
Yeah. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, exactly.
you know Jamaluddin, you've I would consider you a storyteller. You've obviously written a book, short stories, essays, film as well. Um, what's next for you?
I have, you know, film film stuff, film works. I've not done in a long time. I think the last film project that I worked, um, it was in 2012. And then I have not worked on any film since, but essays and writing, that I do more. The next one would be, after I finished this project and I was waiting for my agent to kind of shop it around, I started working on another book. So I'm excited to go back to work on that.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about that story or that book?
That story would be it's still I'm still trying to figure out what it's going to be. There are some characters that I really like. There's some topics that I really like, that I'm going to explore more. Um, I think part of it would be a love story, but a love
Ah,
story that is um, dark and challenging. You know, not a happy rom-com, but a more complex complex dynamics, because I like to uh, dig deeper into some of the, you know, emotions that we talk about so casually
mhm.
in our daily conversation. Like we say, so and so is in love, and we just leave it at that. We don't really explore what that means. You know, what kind of joy and anxieties and restlessness comes with love. You know, and love is, or romantic love is, one of the themes that I would like to explore in this new project. But there are other things, because in a place like Afghanistan, fortunately or unfortunately, there are so many things that is outside your control. You know,
Yeah.
so kind of bringing those into the narrative as well.
Yeah. Um, this was a wonderful book to read. I appreciated the style that it was written in. Um, Thank you for writing this. Nothing good happens in Wazirabad on Wednesday. My guest has been Jamaluddin. Uh, Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. That was great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I was
I,
reading I was reading this interview by an Indian novelist, um, Anuradha Roy,
okay.
and she was mentioning in one of the interviews that what she likes about reading or novels is that every chapter is like a room. You enter a room and you
Ah,
want to see what is in the room, how it feels to be in that room. And then you walk out of it and goes into another room in the same corridor, and it's a whole different room, right? And
that's yeah.
you know, like, I look at this book, I would like to even take it a step further, and I say, it's the way I write, or I'd like to write, is that each sentence should be the best sentence that it can be in that place, in that chapter, in that page. And if you open the book on a random page and you read a sentence, that sentence should not be inferior in any way to any other sentence in the book. That's, you know, so every sentence should be as good as they can be. So now every sentence becomes a room that you can go through
Wow.
and experience it and hopefully enjoy it.
Is there? Well, listen. I have to ask you this now. I'm going to guess you have a copy of this with you right now. Is that
I
yeah?
do.
Okay. Is there a is there a favorite sentence, a favorite page, paragraph? I know this is like asking my grandmother when she was alive, who was your favorite child, and she would tell me it's like asking me which eye do I want to lose. It's an impossible
uh,
question.
I would probably, I would probably, I would probably say page 81, the first paragraph of the chapter, The Summer of Rooster Watching and Love. Um,
I'm wondering
that could be
if you can read it for us.
absolutely. Or let me see, there was another. Let me see if I can find.
Even the
Um,
titles of your chapters are like thought provoking. You see a chapter, okay, I'm looking forward to this rooster.
um, yeah, so either that paragraph or a paragraph towards the end of the book, almost the end, page 262, where Sikandar is talking about how the war or how living in the war felt like. Um, so let me see where is a good place to start. So this, I'll just read this paragraph that's almost the end of the book. And here, Sikandar is telling Husnia, the woman that they are in a way in love, about the time before Husnia arrived in the neighborhood and how Sikandar experienced the war. So he says, it was a complete war, he told her. Besides the bloodshed, destruction, and loss of innocence, it had a kind of unmistakable thrill mixed with terror that got your heart beating wildly. In the brief silence after a shell was launched and before it began to whistle, the mind got flooded with all sorts of thoughts, and as it shrieked past overhead, those who meant anything to you blew up in pieces in the imagination. For a moment, you became numb and heavy, and then light and alert if the shell landed nearby and the prospect of death awakened the senses. In the ensuing quietness, when the world stopped shaking and you could hear your breathing again, you felt as if you were encountering life for the very first time. The form of things seemed so unexplored, their fragrance so unfamiliar, their color so unseen and sharp that it continued to glow even after you had shut your eyes. Things were exactly what they were, not your perception or memory of them. The sun, the rain, the dust, the yellowing green oranges, the husks of rice grains, the loose tea leaves, the cornflour, the tobacco, the laundry soap, the newspaper bags, the fresh apple wedges in the mousetrap, and the rats in the walls, a distinct sense that floated unmixed with those other things that came on the breeze of fresh bread and burning oak, of medicine and sickness, of gunpowder and coal and rusting metal and wet mules. The war had spring and summer and fall and winter, and it had peace, urgent and intense, full of arresting beauty, full of possibilities, full of news and surprises.
Hmm. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for asking good questions.
Oh no, it's been my pleasure. Again, my guest has been Jamaluddin Aram. His book is "Nothing Good Happens in Wazirabad" on Wednesday, published by Simon and Schuster, imprint Scribner Canada. Uh, go and buy this wherever you buy books from. Go to your favorite local bookstore or go online and purchase this. It's a great read. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kareem.